Manly Hall official, is glad to produce, publish and offer. Magic in Persia and the Wine of Life. Near the close of the 11th century at Naishapur, in Khorasan, there lived a poet-philosopher Omar Khayyam. Little is known of his private life and history, but today the verses of Omar, called the Rubaiyat, live as they have never lived before. He was the first great writer of Persia and has been read and studied through all these hundreds of years in his native land, but it does seem like a strange twisting of fate that he should be so alive in this ultra-modern world of ours, and that his piquant, old-world philosophy should ring so true today. However, there is probably no more widely misunderstood writer in all the annals of literature than Omar, for the peculiar phraseology of his work is very deceiving, and his meaning is usually directly contrary to the statement made. But a careful analysis of his writing will show the observant thinker that in every case there is a deep underlying meaning that bespeaks of great philosophical understanding. Nor did his genius stop at verse-making, for he was the foremost mathematician and scientific astronomer of his day, and much of the calendar system we use now was brought to its present state by his efforts. And it does not seem fitting that one who so lived the life of a sage and mystic should have written light and meaningless things. But that is the way of the world, they only see with the eyes they have. It is just the same with our Bible. The historians read it as history, the imaginative read it as romance, the astrologers read it as astrology, the alchemists read it as alchemical, and the materialists, well, to them all the spiritual scripture of the world is just so much useless tommirot. Consequently they condemn, destroy, and paint darkly everything of such nature with which they come in contact. And that is just why most of the ancient books of a religious nature were written as they were, in allegory, hidden from the eyes of those who are not ready to know. Reading the following verses of the Rubaiyat through the eyes of the rank materialist, what have we? Waste not your hour, nor in the vain pursuit of this and that endeavor and dispute, better be jocund with the fruitful grape than sadden after none, or bitter, fruit. For as in less not though with rule and line, and up and down by logic I define, of all that one should care to fathom, I was never deep in anything but wine. Come, fill the cup, and in the fire of spring your winter garment of repentance fling. The bird of time has but a little way to flutter in, the bird is on the wing. Just the rambling fantasies of a drunkard, nothing more nor less than beautiful poetry about drink and intoxication. And that is what the average individual sees. Others say, no, no, there is something deeper behind it, and so lay it aside. They are willing to believe that it is inspired perhaps, but how and why, or what it really means, is nothing at all to them. However, it is a known fact that Omar talked a great deal more of his wine than he drank of it, and though his entire philosophy is centered around the brimming cup, he means something else. The Rubaiyat is a conversation or soliloquy delivered by the human soul to its divine spirit, referring to the body as the clay cup, in some instances as the loaf of bread, and to the life in man as the red wine, here with a loaf of bread beneath the bough, a flask of wine, a book of verse, and thou beside me singing in the wilderness, and wilderness is paradise enow. For thousands of years the juice of the grape has been used to represent the life essence in man because it is the closest thing in nature to human blood, and it contains the sun's vitalizing rays in a greater amount than anything else, for the sun is the base of its fermentation. And as the human brain with its many convolutions resembles a bunch of grapes, it is called the bough or grape, while this essence or spiritual life of man is in the brain centers and is the ref or the juice of the grape. And so Omar says that the wine of life is all there is and all else is a lie. Speaking of his search for some other thing worthwhile and the uselessness of it all, he says, "Myself when young did eagerly frequent doctor and saint and heard great argument about it and about, but evermore came out by the same door wherein I went. Why, all the saints and sages who discussed of the two worlds so learnedly are thrust like foolish prophets forth, their words to scorn are scattered, and their mouths are stopped with dust. And who has not heard, as he did, the saints and sages discus sing?" If you're enjoying this video and finding value in the content, we kindly ask you to take a moment to subscribe to the channel. A large portion of our listeners and viewers haven't subscribed yet, and by doing so, you'll help us grow and continue bringing you more high-quality audiobooks. Your support means a lot to us, and it's just one click away. So, go ahead and hit that subscribe button to stay connected and never miss out on our latest releases. We have a number of them right in this city. They gather on the street corners and in halls, shouting in all directions. One will say, "Ectoplasm is the base of all things." Another will answer, "No, it is protoplasm." Then, "You fool! It is ectoplasm." And they rip, and rant, and roar. It was this that Omar enjoyed and said of them, "They are foolish prophets and in the end their mouths are stopped with dust." And it is true, for that is the end of all. The ranters and roarers die hard, but there is only one ending: death stops it all. And so Omar preferred not to speculate upon the beginning nor the hereafter. He deals not with where we came from, where we are going and why, but only with what we are doing today. His sentiments are, if I do that which is good today, tomorrow will take care of itself. If I made a mistake yesterday, it does no good to worry about it now. Strange is it not? That of the myriads who before us passed the door of darkness, though not one returns to tell us of the road, which to discover we must travel to. Alike for those who for today prepare, and those that after some tomorrow stare, a muezzin from the tower of darkness fools, your reward is neither here nor there. Ah, my beloved, fill the cup that clears today of past regret and future fears. Tomorrow, why, tomorrow I may be myself with yesterday's 7,000 years. Ah, make the most of what we yet may spend, before we too into the dust descend, dust into dust, and under dust to lie, sans wine, sans song, sans singer, and sans end. And of the hopelessness of human destiny he speaks, into this universe, and why not knowing, nor whence, like water willy-nilly flowing, and out of it, as wind along the waste, I know not whither, willy-nilly blowing. What, without asking, hither hurried whence? And, without asking, whither hurried hence? Oh, many a cup of this forbidden wine must drown the memory of that insolence. Up from earth's center through the seventh gate I rose, and on the throne of Saturn sate, and many a knot unraveled by the road, but not the master knot of human fate. There was a door to which I found no key, there was the veil through which I could not see, some little talk of me and thee there was, and then no more of thee and me. Earth could not answer, nor the seas that mourn in flowing purple, of their Lord forlorn, nor rolling heaven, with all his signs revealed. and hidden by the sleeve of night and morn. Omar realized that all living things are pieces on a great game board, all moved by a mystic player in the way that they should go. This mysterious player is the spirit of man, and the checkerboard is life, and the pieces on the board are the living problems which confront us. And we are the mystery of every game we play, but most of us get so wrapped up in our game that we become enslaved to our own selves instead of being masters of the chessboard. We are no other than a moving row of magic shadow shapes that come and go round with this sun-illumined lantern held in midnight by the master of the show, impotent pieces of the game he plays upon this checkerboard of nights and days, hither and thither moves, and checks, and slays, and one by one back in the closet lays. The ball no question makes of eyes and nose, but right or left as strikes the player goes. And he that tossed you down into the field, he knows about it all, he knows. The moving finger writes, and having writ, moves on, nor all your piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all your tears wash out a word of it. In that inverted bowl they call the sky, whereunder crawling cooped we live and die, lift not your hands to it for help, for it as impotently rolls as you or I. And as though to lessen or counteract the utter hopelessness of this, he brings the power of human individuality to bear. I sent my soul through the invisible, some letter of that afterlife to spell, and by my soul returned to me, and answered I myself am heaven and hell. Heaven but the vision of fulfilled desire, and hell but the shadow of a soul on fire, cast on the darkness into which ourselves, so late emergencied from, shall so soon expire. And then of the responsibility of the soul, perhaps a hint of reincarnation, he writes the following, and gives the urge to live in the today and drink the ever-present wine of life. Yesterday this day's madness did prepare tomorrow's silence, triumph, or despair, drink. For you know not whence you came, drink. For you know not why you go, nor where. And so the entire philosophy of the Rubaiyat twines round the vine of life, and the key to the whole is in learning how to drink this mystic wine. When man lives properly and is vitalized by this life, the food he eats and the sun he absorbs, he gathers into his being a spiritual essence, extracting it from all of the base elements that constitute his bodies. And this essence of life is the basis of all energy, and the whole secret of this mystic wine is in the conservation of energy and its expression through creative channels. Wherever energy is used, it should produce something equal to the amount expended, and if man would only realize this, he would be less likely to waste the precious motive power of life in riotous living, for he would know that when he expends it constructively he would gain constructively, and when he uses it destructively he loses twice as much. A person who gets violently angry and cannot restrain himself is intoxicated with this life energy, and the essence is fermented through perversion. It is when this energy is turned upward into the brain that it becomes creative, and when turned downward into the generative system in perversion that it becomes destructive. When this subtle substance, the wine of life, vitalizes the brain and all the energies and then turned into the upper room, then man truly drinks of the fruit of the vine, and partakes of the substances he has transmuted. And Omar says, if you are living on this fruit of the vine you have secured all this world has to give, symbolizing the great life-giving qualities of the wine, the grape that can with logic absolute the 2 and 70 jarring sects confute, the sovereign alchemist that in a trice life's leaden metal into gold transmute. Why, be this juice the growth of God, who dare blaspheme the twisted tendril as a snare? A blessing, we should use it, should we not? And if a curse, why, then, who said it there? I must abjure the balm of life, I must, scared by some after-reckoning taken on trust, or lured with hope of some diviner drink, to fill the cup when crumbled into dust threats of hell and hopes of paradise. One thing at least is certain, this life flies. One thing is certain and the rest is lies. The flower that once has blown forever dies. And so this transmutation of the life energies is the greatest alchemical mystery the world has ever known. If the cup be empty, there is no philosophy, and the argument of sage and seer means nothing. The path that the individual walks through years and lives of experience, the growth, the gains by practical labor, mental, spiritual, and physical, are the basis of the wisdom teachings, and there is no other way. Omar says that life is wine poured into a jug and that a broken jug is of no use to anyone, for there is nothing in it. And we have with us and all around those broken jugs, walking about with nothing in them but ashes. Inside they are cremated by the fires of desire, hate and fear, and the flames of passion, burned out. The vine is dead and all that remains is just an urn filled with ashes. And so, if you will read Omar Khayyam's beautiful verses, taking the human soul as the vine, the bread as the bodies, the wine as the blood or life giver, and Omar as the spirit, you will find something very useful. The bunch of grapes as the brain has been the symbol of life for ages, for in it is contained the life forces which make possible every expression of energy man has. And mastery and initiation is the complete control of it and the turning of it into the development of the spiritual organism. It is suffering, sorrow, philosophy, art, science and study which gradually attain to that end. But the greatest means known to man are purification and balance. Purification of life and motive turns this energy from all destructive application, and the absolute poise of mastery prevents its expansion into useless pursuits. All depends upon the individual. When he lives the life, he shall know the doctrine. There are many more wonderful and deeply mystic truths brought out in this beautiful classic, and in this article we have only touched a few of them lightly, for lack of space prevents going into it verse by verse and giving it the interpretation it deserves. Still, this brief summary will give some idea of the great import of this deeply religious poem. The whole work is based upon the knowledge of man's duty to the life forces within him. And death means that this energy is gone, and therefore Omar says that whoever has inverted the cup is dead. And so ends the poem with these verses: yon rising moon that looks for us again. How often hereafter will she wax and wane? How oft hereafter rising look for us through this same garden, and for one am vain. And when like her, O Saki, you will pass among the guests star-scattered on the grass, and in your blissful errand reach the spot where I made one turn down an empty glass. Correct breathing. Man's lower bodies receive nourishment and vitalizing power in three general ways. First, through the direct rays of the sun passing in through the crown of the head or the spleen. Secondly, through food from which he extracts the vital element, and third, from breathing by which he oxygenizes his bodies. Oxygen is absolutely necessary to the unfoldment of man's consciousness. The average individual has no idea either of its importance or of how to do it, thus he overlooks a valuable opportunity for health. Everyone should sleep in well-ventilated rooms with the windows open and should spend 5 or 10 minutes every morning in deep breathing. The more one breathes, the less one will have to eat, until finally it is possible to practically maintain oneself on oxygen. Man only uses about 1/3 of his lung capacity. He should at least double the quantity of his inhalation. The corresponding outgoing breath frees the body from carbon dioxide, the great death-dealing element in man. If he will breath twice as much, he can divide his ill health and subtract 1/2. Further light on the health problem. When suffering from the following ailments, do not go to a doctor, just knock your head against a wall. If your corns ache, it is not nature's fault. Leather shoes would bring corns out on a boot jack, and as a very powerful nerve center is in the sole of each foot, and leather shoes prohibit the feet from breathing, do not be surprised if you are sick. Any gentleman who wears a tight-fitting hat must not be surprised if he develops a furless pate, for you cannot strangle hair roots and have them live any more than you could go into an airtight room for several hours and come out alive. Any of our dear lady friends who insist upon walking around on stilts, French heels, are subjecting themselves to over 40 diseases, including spinal ailments, kidney trouble, nervousness, general lassitude, paralysis, stomach trouble, and nearly every known form of disease except accidents, and those are not strictly excluded, as a person can twist their ankles on high heels without half trying. Yesterday we passed down the street behind a pair of 2.5-inch heels, and the ankles above were rolling like chips in a heavy sea, while the party above the ankles has been wondering why she has had a general reliability for years. Any man who makes a chimney out of himself has no right to be healthy and will not be, and those of our dear friends who insist upon their nice juicy beef steaks should be tickled to death when uric acid gets them, because they have been inviting it to come. The mystery is not that we do not live longer, the mystery is we live at all. If we continue to wear tight-fitting clothes which will not allow the body to breathe, we will keep right on having all the diseases that medical science has differentiated, and some more they have not found yet. So might it be. The eternal excuse. When it is gently hinted to an individual that he is not living up to the best that is in him, could be doing better, etc., there is one excuse that will almost always come back to you: well, I am doing about as well as you, or am as honest as the next fellow, or similar expressions. Man is eternally excusing his own weaknesses by pointing out similar shortcomings in his companions. He considers this to be a clinching argument, while in reality it is no argument at all. The virtue of sin cannot be proved by its mere existence, neither can our shortcomings be sanctioned because our brother man expresses them also. Many times we go out to put a slick deal over on our brother, excusing ourselves by saying, "He'll do it to me if I don't get to him first." All these things are excuses to cover human weakness. Man should strive to attain the best and allow no comparison to deter him from attaining individual mastery. His duty is not to be just as good as the world, but to be perfect, and he must attend to the accomplishment of this end. The man who laughed. In sunny Sicily, beneath the towering height of Mount Etna, under whose mystic pile, so legend tells, the Vulcans hammer out the weapons of Jove on the anvil of the gods, there lies a little village. Sicily is dotted with many lovely little hamlets, looking like bright nosegays set in frames of green and brown. One of these little villages nestles close in the arms of Etna, and many of its buildings reflect the whims of the volcano. Far above it, a little dot on the mountain, One can see the great observatory, and below rolls the blue waters of the Mediterranean. A picturesque little town it is, just as the mind of the dreamer loves to create, and as an imagination the homely old-fashioned peasant life is still lived. On a wall built from the rocks of the flaming mountain sat a native guide who looked not unlike a brigand, and was dressed in accordance with his personality. His ears were pierced, and in them hung heavy golden rings. His hair was controlled within the bonds of a red bandana handkerchief, and his drooping black mustache was carefully and fiercely combed, adding a swagger note to his eccentric figure. Beside him stood George Washington. By way of explanation, we may add that George W. was a long-eared, tired-looking Sicilian donkey who would always lie down when you wanted him to stand up and stand up when you wanted him to lie down. Washington and his master were part of the natural scenery of the village, and strangers passing through on their ride around the island were shown the village church, the cave of the saints nearby, and George Washington. Leonardo, the guide, had a peculiar distinction. He spoke the best English for miles around, and therefore was always watching for an opportunity to commercialize his intelligence. At the time our story opens, he had Henry Thornton at his mercy. Thornton was a man with a past, not the kind that men are ashamed of, but the kind that some men are broken by. It is said that the world is filled with heartless men, but this is not essentially the case, and careful investigation will prove that the heart of man breaks just as easily as the heart of a woman. But a man hides it more carefully and receives little sympathy for the ache that the world does not see. Thornton was one of those men who could neither conceal nor forget, and he carried his sorrow with him wherever he went. His mind was always obsessed with one thought, and he lived entirely in the years that were past. The tale of woe of this man was a long one, and also an old one. It fills the lives of thousands all over the world, for there are none who can hurt us as much as those we love and trust. It was simply the story of one who cared and another who simply played, and with the carelessness of a child broke a human heart. That was years ago, in the days of lace and lavender, and the thoughtless one had lain asleep these many years in a little village cemetery. All the world had forgotten save one, all the world had forgiven save one, but even as the gray shadows began to fall on the life of Henry Thornton, he remembered. His handsome face would cloud and his jaw set tighter as he vainly sought for something upon which to wreak his venom, a poison long brewing in a heart that hated happiness because it was not happy too. As Thornton stood beside the guide, leaning over the old wall, his eyes fell upon a little garden some 20 feet below him, a pretty place filled with rustic chairs and tables where the town folk came to sup their sour wine and tell the stories of the day. It was deserted save for a few children playing in a corner and one figure that sat huddled in a brown robe at one of the tables. The children were playing some strange game, and every few minutes they would tumble over each other in a mad whirl of bare arms and legs, and the Sicilian dust rose in a cloud about the scene. The figure at the table raised his head, and a long peal of deep-throated laughter sounded up to the two men above. Thornton's face had been composed, but as this merry sound broke upon his ears his jaw set, his eyes became slits, and he hissed out 3 words with all of the bile of years of acidity. "Damn that man!" The guide looked at the American in amazement and then followed his eyes to the little scene below. He quickly crossed himself, but made no audible reply, although he murmured something under his breath. Thornton continued to gaze at the little group, and then feeling that he must make a confidant of someone, he turned to Leonardo. "Come sit down on this wall. I want to tell you something. I will explain my attitude, for it must seem very strange to you." "Si, Signor," answered the guide, and with a look to his mule he seated himself upon the wall, perfectly willing to let the American talk as long as his pay went on. Thornton took out a cigarette case and gave the Italian a smoke, then closing the case, sat gazing at it for several seconds, and then turned it so the guide could see the little oil-painted miniature beautifully done by some master's hand upon an inlay of purest ivory. The Sicilian looked at the face for several seconds, and then raising his eyes and opening his hands he muttered, "She is a beautiful face." "Yes, she was beautiful in the days gone by," answered Thornton, staring out into the distant haze that hung over the Mediterranean. "Beautiful but thoughtless. She played with hitherto as children play with dolls, and mine was broken in the game." That was nearly 40 years ago in America's sunny Southland, where beauty is nature's order and gallantry her decreo. God, that I could forget like others do, but I cannot. I have gone from one end of the earth to the other, but ever that face haunts me. I have never laughed since that day unless it was in a mad delirium. I have taken the path of forgetfulness, but there is no peace. In the opium smoke she haunts me, in drink she dances in my wineglass, breaking my heart again and again as she did that day. My hair turned white in just a few short months, and I have lived in sorrow and sadness these many years. That is why I hate to see people happy. Why should they be so when I am not? Did God send me into this world to wander my life in agony? When I see these children playing in happiness and hear the glad laughter, I go insane to think of the years of loneliness I have come through, how I might have listened to the laughter of my own children, and in my old age been peaceful in the realization of life's dream. That, sir, is why I hate people that laugh and revile the God who gave me the heart to love and then doomed it to be broken by. There he laughing again. Oh, damn that man, I shall go mad if he does not stop. I would give all I own to be he this day, just so that I could laugh. Surely, Signor, you are jesting. You do not mean to say that you would like to change places with Fra Angelico, the old man who sits down there at the table? Surely yon jest. No, Leonardo. I am in deadly earnest. I would give all I own if I could laugh as he laughs today. Signor, you have told me a story, now let me tell you one, the story of the old man who sits there at the table, laughing at the children who play around his feet. May I tell it to you? Yes, go ahead. I do not care when I get back to the hotel. I would not be sorry if I never did. All right, Signor, I shall proceed. It was, let me see, and the Sicilian counted on his fingers, 3, 4, 5, 6, yes, 6 years ago that Antonio had his little market in Aderno. He had a beautiful little farm up on the side of Etna. You see where that black streak is? Well, Antonio's farm was just a little to the right of that heap of boulders. Signor, that was in the year of the eruption. Down the sides of our mountain the lava came in a great fiery stream, and Antonio was in the marketplace at the time. Like a madman he rushed home, but when he got there all he saw was a great fissure in the earth, with sulfur fumes rising from its depths. All in a few seconds his wife whom he adored, his mother whom he worshipped, and his 5 little children whom he cherished more than life itself were swallowed up by the flaming mountain. Well, Signor, we saw little of Antonio for many months. He wandered like a madman among the hills, and even the brigands grew afraid of him. He climbed among the rocks, wild-eyed and crazy. But at last, he grew quiet again, and feeling that he had nothing left to live for, he climbed up yonder hill to the little monastery. There he took holy orders and gave his life to the service of Christ and the Blessed Virgin. Antonio vanished from the world, and there appeared in his place Fra Angelico, who has lived ever since to try and help others. "Did he really go through all that?" asked Thornton in amazement. "Si, Signor, and much more in his heart that no man shall ever know. And yet he can laugh. Oh, how I envy such a man as that! Why did God give him courage to laugh and me only the weakness to cry? Leonardo, I am more jealous of that man than of any other living thing in the universe. Would give anything to be as happy." "Surely, Signor, you do not mean that? You are not jealous of poor Fra Angelico?" "Yes, I am jealous of him. He is able to laugh and forget." "He cannot help laughing, Signor, nor can he help forgetting. The good God has taken his mind away from him. The poor father has been matting these many years. Surely you are not jealous of a babbling idiot, nor would you curse a man whose sorrow has taken away his mind. In this world, Signor, it is well to be careful whom we envy, for those who laugh often are sadder than those who cry." The homage. It was about 4 years after when the youth went again up into the mountains, for years of sunshine and of rain, for years that changed the affairs of man but left the mountains just the same. The green grass, the lofty pines and the great belts of whitened snow had apparently not changed at all. One morning as the sun arose, a strange scene confronted the eye. Over the mountain there hung a great, gray cloud which twisted, turned, and seethed in a million ever-changing folds. The whole atmosphere in the mountains was hushed and still, and a great leaden silence hung over nature. Hunters and trappers whispered that never before in all the years they had lived among the hills had they ever seen such a strange mystery before. As the day wore on, the dark cloud became deeper, a low moan broke out from the heavens, it rose and fell with the passing of the winds, a great sighing sound as that of the dying. Each tree seemed to pick it up, reverberate and echo it from their crests and branches. Little shrubs and hushes seemed also to bow their heads, while the arms of the lofty pines hung drear and dismal in the steely light. Up among the rocks great groaning sounds came, and masses of boulder and dirt became thundering avalanches upon the mountain sides. The snow upon the crest turned gray, and everything seemed to hang in awe and suspense during nature's agitation. That day the youth was impelled to climb again that mountain, and so he wound in and out along the little path and, following intuitional guidance, branched off from it, and after a short walk reached the point where the valley began and the mountain peaks left off. There among the rocks, half hidden by the darkness, stood the little cabin as he had seen it before. But now everything seemed different. He shrank back in wonder, for coming out of the mountains, out of the very earth itself, out of the skies, and up out of the waters of the river that flowed by the door, a great stream was coming, a stream of living creatures. Stately stags and meek-eyed doves, surrounded by their young, broke through the forests in silent majesty. Great lumbering bears came also, not one but many. The air was filled with the humming, droning of the wings of birds, and even the steely light was shadowed by the multitude of their wings. From the forest came the wolves and foxes, and in the little pool by the cabin door fishes of many colors gathered, swimming to and fro, so many that the water seemed one living mass. Then it seemed that the great heads of the pine trees were bowed, their branches bent low, and from the mountain tops a great cloud of leaves and fine pine needles descended like a rain upon the cabin. All nature was united in a strange sad song, even the very earth itself seemed joined in a sobbing melody. In awe and fear the youth crept to the cabin door and gazed within. There on his pallet of straw lay the old man of the mountain, his hands folded upon his breast, his white herd spread upon his cowl, and his eyes closed. Without entering in, the youth knew the tragedy. The hermit was dead. At the foot of the rough wooden pallet stood the great arched antlered stag, his head down so that his soft nose rested on the edge of the couch. In the hollow of the old man's arms sat the little gray squirrel, trying to force a hazelnut between the cold white lips. Little birds were shrilly crying as they circled around his head, and the great wolf lay like a watchdog before the body of the one he loved. The soft scent of the forest came in through the door which stood ajar, for in the old cabin that door was never closed. Little baby birds in their nest cried for the hand which could feed them no more. A thin stream of tears poured over the youth's face as he gazed upon the scene. Nature knew it had lost its truest friend. In all the world that taunted, one alone had loved them. In a world that slew and hated and thoughtlessly robbed them of their right to live, they had found one who understood. And now the cold fingers of eternal night had closed his eyes, and the chilly voice of the mountain peaks had whispered in his ear. Who could they go to now when their friend was dead? Soon again the rude hand of the huntsman would have no sweet voice to offset it. The beasts knew this and were sad. The youth stood for several seconds, unable to take his eyes from the scene. A great something welled up in his soul, and he remembered the promise he had made, his promise to be true to the furred and feathered friends. He passed slowly through the cabin door. The great wolf looked at him, did not move. Just a low howl like a groan of despair broke from the beast's throat. As he touched the still cold form of the hermit, the little squirrel raised his eyes, heady bright eyes like sparks of fire, and two tiny paws reached out to cover the face of the master he had loved. The youth stroked the little beast's shiny body as it lay stretched out across the form of the hermit, and, biting his lip to hold and check the pain of his soul, the hunter of the days gone by stepped again to the door of the cabin and gazed out. He started back from sheer amazement. Such a sight as met his vision had never before confronted man, nor probably ever will again. As far as the eyes could reach in every direction, the mountains and valleys were alive. Each tree branch bore its weight of feathery life. In each glade and opening stood some stately beast, not hundreds nor thousands, it seemed all nature was gathered there. The mighty gray clouds over the mountains rumbled and moaned, and lurid flashes of lightning rent their hazy depths. A gentle rain was pouring down, pattering among the leaves, and the youth, looking at the form on the couch, murmured, "Indeed blessed are the dead that the rain raineth upon." A voice within him spoke, saying, "When has such homage been done to living man? Has emperor or king had such a cortege as this? Many great ladies and grand men march in the funerals of the great. Many there are who come and pay respects to a nation's dead, and oft times they do not know and do not care, but each one who stands in this great cortege is true to the soul of its being. No sham is here, no pretense. Each one of these beasts to its very soul adores the thing it pays its homage to. Each of these little furred and feathered things would gladly die for that one. Each tree and stone would give of its fleeting life the fullest and the utmost. When man is a friend among the beasts and birds, that man is good, for there is no guile in their lives, no subtleness in their adoration. The youth was overcome and sinking upon his knees gazed out at that endless stream of faces, great sorrowing eyes that could not speak but with lowered heads and drooping bodies whispered the emotions of their souls. The great strong trees, even the blades of grass, bent at their heads, for the one who loved them all had gone away. "This is my task," murmured the youth, "and I will fill it." What greater proof has man of the depth of his sincerity than that a ring of faces such as these should pay devotion to him? I am not going back into the valley again. I am going to stay and serve these beasts and birds as the old man did. The shades of night fell over the mountain, but they were alight that night with 1,000,000 fires. 1,000,000 flaming altars sent up their sacrifices, and through the night gleaming coals of fire, the eyes of the silent watchers, row after row, stretched out into an infinity. The next morning when the sun rose there was a new hermit living in the mountains. Under a cross of rocks the body of the aged man was laid to rest while his spirit interceded before a greater throne for the beasts that he had loved. The great cowl was worn by another, the staff strengthened another's hand. So through the years that went rapidly by, in his love for nature, the one who once had slain nursed the wounds that he had made. The birds and beasts learned to know him also, and soon they gathered around his door to whisper their secrets in his ear and tell their love stories to his soul. And some there were who slowly learned to forget the other one and to love him anew in the one he had awakened. Down in the village no man knew what had happened. They did not know that the hermit of the pines was dead, for still his gray-cowled figure wandered among the hills. They used to say, "How is it that a man should be willing to live with beasts?" The old hermit had known the secret, and the younger one was fast learning it. And so, the legend says that to this day in the heart of those hills there lives an insane old man, broken by some earthly sorrow, who has given up the benefits of earthly affection to live in the mountains like a beast. They laugh about him in the village, and they lay wagers as to who shall find his bones. But in the same voice they tell you of that wonderful day years ago when the mountains grew dark and the beasts flocked together and the great miracle took place in the hills. That story will never die in the little city at the base of the mountains. In awe they tell you of the thunder and of the majesty of the lightning. The superstitious cross themselves and say that the Spirit of God Himself walked the hills that day. They never knew, nor will they ever know, that this was nature's homage, nature's only way of showing its reverence and its love for the old hermit in the gray cowl who lived in the little cabin where the valley meets the hills. Copyright 2025 by Manly Hall Official. Thank you for listening. Please consider to subscribe, like, and share to help the channel growth. New videos on a daily basis.